Hey skaters, I'm Roller Goolie and we're back with another episode of Welcome to the Streets. Once again, thank you to Fargo Skate Park for letting us use their facility to do this tutorial. And on that note, today's tutorial is going to be about rotations. What are rotations? I'm talking 180s, 360s, 180s and 360s. I can't 540 yet. There's a really awesome 540 video that we can link below that my friend did, but I feel pretty confident in my 360s and 180s, so I'm going to be showing you how to do forward 180s, fakie to forward 180s, forward 360s, and fakie 360s. So this video is kind of a sequel to gaps, where I talk about absorbing your landing, how to kind of launch off your legs to get some air, all that good stuff that is really important to have those foundational skills before you move on into 180s and 360s. Please refer to that video if you haven't seen that one already, but I really suggest that you dial in those foundational skills before you jump ahead. That will greatly help you when we get into taking it to the real street. Without further ado, here we go. Let's get into forward 180s. A forward 180 is when you start out by rolling forward and you jump, so that way you end up skating fakie. And again, fakie is backwards. I like to drill my muscle memory and foundation with 180s on flat ground first, so that way I know exactly what my body needs to do when I take it to a gap. And a gap again is from jumping to one obstacle to another, or from a higher obstacle to a lower obstacle, or something that's raised up to the flat ground. So like when we were doing forward jumps, we're gonna use the same skills of flicking off from the toes, getting the power from your legs, and absorbing your landing every time. But what's gonna be different here is you're gonna be adding in a rotation now. What you wanna do to get your rotation, rotating your shoulders, so moving your shoulders in the direction that you wanna go is gonna help your body turn, but you wanna keep your head kind of focused on a spot. So I'll pick a spot. Picking a spot on the ground, or like where I wanna land, is a little bit better for me than picking a spot on the wall. And I rotate my shoulders, keeping my eyes on the spot on the ground that I want to keep them on. I am allowing the rest of my body to flow with the direction that my shoulders are turning. And then once my feet hit the ground, I'm absorbing for landing. And this is when you can kind of change your focus from that spot on the ground to wherever you need to have a safe roll away. So like the past video, we're going to be doing some squats to get our legs nice and warmed up. If you have a nice good squat, you're shooting the power through your legs, that is what gives you some height on your jump. Practicing squats, because when you land, then you're kind of going back into a squat. Since we're going to be getting into 180s, we're going to start practicing picking our spot on the floor. So we're just squatting in place, still getting warmed up and still building up that muscle memory for when we're ready to take it to a bigger height. Once we're comfortable with that, we're gonna add some movement by rolling. So pick a pace that feels good for you. The more solid and comfortable you feel in this drill, the easier it's gonna be for you when you take it to a height. And once we're all warmed up, let's start with something smaller. It doesn't even have to be this size of ledge that I'm gonna be jumping off of. It could be something even smaller. So pick something that's comfortable for you. Start small and then build up from there. That's gonna greatly help you once you start trying to jump off bigger things. I tend to think that speed is usually our friend, especially when it comes to doing gaps. It can kind of throw off your landing if you're going a bit slow, because it does help carry our momentum and it doesn't let the impact just be straight down. It kind of carries the impact through. You don't have to pick up your legs super high at first. You can just let your body focus on the rotation and the landing for now. And once you feel more comfortable, you can start picking up your legs a little bit to add some more height. Timing can be important here. You don't want to rotate too early, because that could throw off your landing. If you're rotating too early, then you don't have kind of the air awareness, I guess. That's like the negative space that you're floating in once you leave the obstacle and before you land. You got to find like this middle ground, because you also don't want to rotate too late, because you might not make the rotation all the way before you land. And there definitely are tricks that are, they try to emphasize doing late rotations, and I think they're awesome. I love them. A lot of rollerbladers do them, but it does take a lot of air awareness and skill and control over rotations. So for the sake of this video, and for just starting out and learning how to do 180s off of gaps, let's just focus on finding a good middle ground and a perfect timed 180. So the best launch off and the best landing. Try to find the timing for that. So it's good to have a 180 down because now you're just taking a little bit extra step or two to get a full rotation to be a 360. The difference with a 360, obviously, you're going to be rotating a little bit more, but you're going to have to really power through your arms for a rotation and have a lot of control with your arms and your core. You really want to focus on your arms carrying the rotation and having a lot of control in your arms and your abs, but you also want to use your head to help carry the rotation. So for 360s, depending on what I'm jumping off of, I'll either pick a spot kind of ahead, like a bit of ahead of me on the floor, or I will pick a place on the wall. But now when you go to rotate, you're not going to be keeping your head looking forward or at your spot like you did with 180. Now this time you're going to let your head rotate with you, and you're going to try to turn your head in 360 and find the spot that you're looking at before. Now that we know where our eyes and our head are trying to be, let's move on to the shoulders and the arms. You don't want to be too dramatic with like grabbing the air and twisting it with you, but I like to start out kind of with my arm, like one in front of me, one to the side, so nothing like too crazy, but having a little bit of a whip with my arms will help the rotation. So it's a full turn with the shoulders. Don't just whip your arms, you want to whip your whole arm and shoulder compartment. I don't know what the word would be. The quadrant needs to turn. Turn it. Turn the whole thing. Not just a little bit, the whole thing. If you let your arms flail out, it will slow down your rotation. So once you pull your arms back into yourself, so they're out here and then you pull them back into yourself, you want to keep them there until you land. If you have them all out, it's going to slow your rotation, it's going to throw off your axis, so you want to keep them in tight, and when you land, you can let your arms open back up for stability, but you don't want to do that until you have finished the rotation and you have landed. So now that we know what our arms and our shoulders and our core is doing, let's also focus on the knees and the feet. When I'm doing my 360, there's kind of a lot going on. I'm worried about the spot, I'm worried about my shoulders, I'm worried about keeping my arms nice and tight, I'm worried about engaging my core. So I'm not super worried about my knees and feet here. A subtle tuck of the knees and pull to the side can also help a rotation. When you want to start working on different grabs or stylizing your 360s, then you really want to start focusing on what your legs are doing. But just for learning them, you just want to make sure that you have control over them. With all of that in mind, you can just practice doing some spins on flat ground without even lifting your feet up, just to get used to the pull with your arms and your shoulders and the spotting. Let's practice on flat ground a little bit, and once you feel good about that, again, do it as many times as you need to before you start adding some momentum, start rolling. Moving on now, let's take it to a small gap. So again, going back to the same ledge or whatever obstacle feels safe for you. What I hear the most from people when it comes to doing a 360 off of a gap versus doing it on flat ground is the end of the space that you have to jump off of becomes a mental block. That can be a little bit scary. It can throw some people off and definitely create a mental block. I know at one point in my skating career, I felt the same way with 360s. I didn't like the idea of having a deadline of when I had to throw the 360. Try not to get hung up on that mental block, but know that you're not alone. Just go back to working on your foundational skills if you have to, and come back to it when you feel ready. So you're just taking your skills from flat ground and adding it to the obstacle. Don't overthink it. If you need to go back to practice, please do so. But I promise if you have the skills of doing a 360 on flat ground, you can take it to another height. We got our 180s, we got our forward 360s. What could be next? Now we're going to be working on fakie to forward 180s. So instead of starting out forward and ending fakie, you're gonna be starting out fakie and ending forward. You want to pick the shoulder that feels the most natural to you to rotate over. If you're not sure which shoulder that is for you, you can try just doing a 180 and find out which shoulder you're still looking over once you've landed. You can just skate backwards around a little bit, just have some fun, and then kind of pay attention to which shoulder you're looking over. But whatever shoulder that is, that's gonna be your most natural way to rotate from fakie to forward. So you might see me do fakie to forward 180s both directions because I can do them both directions. Both directions feel good. You can even drill these skills both directions because that can really open up a lot of doors for you down the road when you're trying different tricks and different rotations out of tricks. Same process, except it's a little bit reversed now. You're going to pick a spot on the floor with your head in your eyes, so you're going to be turning your head in your eyes the direction that you're going to end up. So it's going to be a slight pull with the arms, but mostly turning with the shoulders, followed by the hips, the knees, and the feet. And once you feel solid with these on flat ground, let's take it to an obstacle. So you just want to spot where you want to land. So if you're rolling on the top of the obstacle, you want to make sure your eyes are looking where you want to land. And have your pull with your arms and your shoulders, followed by the rest of your body, and absorb. You might have guessed that doing fakie to forward 180s is your prequel to doing fakie 360s. It's very common that a lot of skaters find fakie 360s to be a little bit easier or natural feeling than forward 360s. With fakie to forward 180s, your head has already done part of the rotation for you, so that one tends to be a little bit easier. You still are going to have a moment where your spatial awareness is kind of closed off for a second. You're going to be rolling fakie and spotting on the floor, and your head has already done part of the rotation. So it almost feels like you have a little bit less of a rotation to get through. So you can practice your rotation with proper body form on flat ground in place first, if that feels the best for you, just to get the hang of it. I'm going to be doing my 360 over my left shoulder. So I'm going to be looking over my left shoulder, picking a spot on the ground. So my head and my eyes have already been turned, looking where I want to go. So much like a normal forward 360. Now for this one, you actually have to follow through and bring your head around. You're going to be looking now at the opposing wall or the opposing direction that you're now going to be skating. So your momentum's going this way, but your head and your eyes is going to be looking this way once you have finished your full 360. So here you just really need to practice the pull through in your shoulders and then finish the turn with your head. Obviously make sure you're following through with the rest of your body. Taking this one to a greater height. This one I have a bigger mental block with than forward 360s. I don't know why. Most people don't, but I do. So you might be like me. Again, don't let having a deadline when you have to throw the 360 get in the way of you taking on this challenge and defeating it. Once you have your skills on the smaller obstacle, you can take it to greater heights, and you can keep pushing that if you want to and see where it can take you. So don't ever feel bad about having to go back to a smaller gap to practice this on, because I do it all the time. Just really focus on the skills that you know that you have in you and don't psych yourself out. Quickly, let's talk about things that can go wrong with these. This is not to deter you from doing these things. This is just to kind of help you problem solve if you're having these issues. So before you throw your rotation or before your legs lift off, if you do not have good form, your axis can get it off. Typically, you want your axis to be like this. If you're all wonky before you leave the ground and you go for the jump or the rotation, your axis can end up like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. And you'll find you start to lose control in the air. Of course, there's going to be airs and rotations where you intentionally are stylizing the axis point of your rotation for the sake of this video and getting our foundational skills for these. That's not what you want. Usually if your axis is getting thrown off, it's because either your form was not good before you left the ground, or it's the way that you're pulling your body. So some people will pull too hard with one arm versus the other, or they're dipping their shoulder down when they go to rotate. All of those things can throw off your access. So you want to make sure that everything is like in alignment with each other, everything's kind of square. You can land too heavy on your toe stops. You might see some people do a 180 and their body starts going forward and all of their weight comes down on their toe stops. Or their feet just slip out from underneath them. So you want to make sure you're keeping your spot on the floor, because that will usually kind of keep you upright and not lean too far forward. If you're finding that you're feeling a lot of impact in your feet on a 180, or you're feeling tension in your back when you do a landing, you want to try to correct that as soon as possible, because both of those things can cause injury. Make sure that you're absorbing through your legs and your knees. Again, the biggest thing is not having good form before you leave, and not having good form when you land. Keeping everything tight and controlled is going to be key with this one, and committing. Falls are going to happen. Sometimes they're just inevitable. So just make sure that you are making yourself small. You're always trying to absorb your landing, because that helps with falls time and time again. I hope these tips were helpful for you in getting rotations down. They can take some time, so don't be discouraged and just keep practicing. Please subscribe, follow our social media channels. We make announcements on there. And again, your support is always appreciated. So like this, leave us a comment, let us know your feedback, let us know if there's something that you want to learn. Thanks so much for watching.